White privilege. For some people, it doesn't exist. For others, it's a thing created by people of color, and sometimes it's because people don't know the real meaning. White privilege is not a suggestion that white people don't struggle or that everything we accomplished was not earned. The truth is, white privilege are inherent social and economic advantages that white people have in a society characterized by racial inequality. It is both a legacy and a cause of racism. It has been one of the biggest social issues for centuries because white people don't want to acknowledge it, although it is white people's issue and we are the ones that need to fix it. No one else can do that for us, but we can't solve this issue if we aren't willing to talk about it. So let's talk about it. This is Acknowledging White Privilege, and we can help change the world. White privilege is everywhere around us. From walking into a store and not being an immediate suspect, or being able to find foundation of your skin tone, to being able to wear your natural hair at school, work, or in sports, to not having to be afraid when you get pulled over by the police, to receiving proper health care, to having an easier path to education, housing, and careers. There is much more, and it is deeper than this, and that's why it's important to reflect on this privilege and open conversations between white people rather than turn to people of color to talk to, because it is our issue that we must solve.
The data tells us that white folks have far more wealth, far more advantage than their black and brown counterparts. Middle-class white folks far better off in terms of wealth than middle-class black folks, and in fact, working-class white people whose head of household didn't even finish high school, so we're talking high school dropouts, have 1/3 more wealth on average than black households headed by college grads. And that doesn't mean that that white family is not struggling. It just means that it still on balance pays to be white in this country.
Unfortunately, white people take longer to acknowledge this privilege. It's easy to not want to look at what may be wrong when you are gaining from it. It oftentimes takes other resources, such as media or other people, for us to realize this issue, unlike it does for people of color, who oftentimes have personal experiences.
I think I realized it when I started studying at the Faculty of Arts in Massachusetts University. I started studying English language and literature, and we had really good courses with our teacher, Jeff Vanderzeel, about American history and culture, and about Native Americans, and about African American history and culture. Also, when I went to the US last year, I also had a really good course called Poverty Studies about issues like this. We had one particular lesson about unpacking our white privilege knapsack, which was about like having an actual like knapsack with privileges that we have as white people. So that was really nice.
I think I realized it pretty soon. I realized it during high school when I started to take interest in social issues, and I started to care about these things, and I decided that I wanted to do something about it in my life. I was mostly made aware of this issue through media. I never really saw it around me, or at least I didn't think it's around me. In Czech Republic, there's this big discrimination against Roma people. It's kind of normalized, which is very bad, and I didn't really notice that something like that is happening. I saw discrimination across the sea through media, etc., and I started to reflect about the situation at home.
I think as Americans, we sort of know about it more from when we were children. Like, we know about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks on the bus, and I knew I'm not Black, I'm white, and I didn't have to deal with that, and my family didn't have to deal with that. And I think a lot of the white privilege that we recognize in America is yes, white people have privilege, but it's not internalized as themselves. I have white privilege, but we're all aware that white people have privilege. but it's more about looking into yourself about the white privilege, which I think is hard. But I think I really realized my white privilege or started to like internally think about my white privilege when I moved here 6 years ago to the Czech Republic.
I don't think there was a moment when I realized there was such a thing as white privilege. It's been more of like a gradual realization throughout sort of my childhood and adult life. I grew up in sort of a relatively multicultural suburb of Oslo, and growing up I remember sort of like my friends being sort of treated with more suspicion than I do. Like later on I've lived in the US for a year, I'm now coming up to 9 years in the UK, and I've always blended in quite well. There's something that I know that a lot of my friends, even people that grew up here, have experienced. I think sort of like that ability to blend in has given me a lot of confidence and allowed me to very rarely feel scared or threatened wherever I go, which sort of through conversation with friends with a bit different backgrounds, I know unfortunately is not the case for everyone.
When I was around 17, 18, I became really active on social media, and I realized and saw how bad and serious racism and discrimination really is. And I started to educate myself, and the more I learned, the more I realized my white privilege, and I could tell how many of those things would not happen to me simply because I'm white. So yeah, I started to learn more, and I started to be more outspoken about it. When we realize our privilege, it might take time to internalize it. But we need to remember it's not about struggles. It's about the society not having biases against us because of our race or background. And that makes a huge difference. That's why it's necessary to address our white privilege, because the good news is that we can use it to fight against racial injustices.
I don't think I started doing that until really recently, like actively doing it. I mean, when I teach English, I feel like the way to educate isn't to be angry, especially as white people. It's not our place to be angry. I think we should be as patient as possible, as hard as that is sometimes, especially with students. I helped our friend Becky with the Black Lives Matter protests in Brno. I try to talk to my family about why the storming of the Capitol is not the same as a Black Lives Matter protest. Keep myself educated as much as I can. Yeah, that's what I try to do. I mean, it's a conversation that we need to start having. We needed to start having a long time ago.
In terms of using my privilege, I probably could do a hell of a lot more. But I also think there's a fine line between using one's privilege to help and also becoming patronizing and taking over a cause. Maybe I'm like erring on the side of caution, but I'm generally unsure what to do about it. I think sort of the best thing I've done is to be more vocal when the topic comes up in conversations with other white people, but also like to resist the urge that I have to be a bit of a know-it-all, and listen more to people that come from a background where they've experienced discrimination, and just try to be there to support.
I've been pretty outspoken about racism and other discriminations for quite a few years now, and so I really just try to talk to people, I educate myself, I try to educate others, although it doesn't always work, and I donate as much as I can to different organizations that support people of color. And yeah, especially since the pandemic, I've been really trying to buy from small Black and brown businesses, so I do that as well. They have better stuff anyway. And yeah, I just try to support and spread awareness.
I started doing a lot of things, I feel, to fight these injustices. I often reflect about how I can do something simply because I'm not oppressed as other minorities. So I decided to take different courses, and I took part in many demonstrations. I became a member of group that is focused on fighting social injustices. The fact that I have so many opportunities to fight these injustices, that I can take place in these demonstrations without feeling that I'm in danger or something, I feel like this is how I can utilize my white privilege, that I don't have to fear about my safety, etc. That means, for me at least, that I should pursue it that much harder. I try to do as best and as much as I can to kind of make at least a small change.
I think shortly after, George Floyd's murder and after the protests started, we started hanging out with Becky more. And I think that's when kind of I started also fighting people about this, because until then I don't think I really fought people about it or tried to discuss this with people. I'm trying to talk to more people. We are in a course about tolerance and culture in society, and we are talking about stuff like this. It's a good fight.
The truth is, acknowledging and using your white privilege takes being uncomfortable at first. It means having tough conversations, not just with others, but mainly with yourself. It means putting yourself out there to speak out against racial inequality, whether that be by talking to others, standing by people of color, attending protests, donating, or even literally standing up in front of someone who might be in danger. It is important to call ourselves out, educate ourselves, be active allies and anti-racism. It takes all of us uniting to make a change.